listening to the Transformations with Jayne podcast. I'm your host, Jayne Nakata, a New Zealander living her best life in Fukushima, Japan. I'm a podcast consultant and the creator of Pod Launch with Jayne, a system that helps you create your dream podcast without all the drama and hassle, leaving you more free time to do the things you love to do. This show is for people who want to hear stories of women who are doing amazing things here in Japan and across the world. You'll find loads of inspiration for how you can live your best life wherever you are. I'm glad you're here. Let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Transformations with Jayne podcast. I'm the host of the show, Jayne Nakata, coming to you from Iwaki City in Fukushima Prefecture, Japan. How awesome is it that we are into September and it's getting cooler and people are in school? We've had a few typhoons and the typhoon day off school the other week. I think my kids went to school 2 days last week because of Silver Week with those holidays on each end of the week and then typhoon day. They went to school on Wednesday and Thursday and I was like, how is it the weekend again already? But we managed, and yeah, it's been such nice weather. I've really enjoyed being outside, and I really wanted to sit down outside and enjoy having like a barbecue or even just drinking my coffee outside. But the mosquitoes are just insane right now. There are so many out there and they find you in about 2 seconds. So I think they must be extra hungry at this time of the year or something. So I haven't really been able to enjoy my outdoor lifestyle here in Iwaki just yet, but hopefully the cooler weather will come and we'll be able to. But it's one of my favorite times of the year. So I'm so happy to be in September. Also, my mum is coming to Japan. I have not seen my mum for 3 years. The last time I saw her was in the summer holidays of 2019 when we went to New Zealand for a month. And shortly after that, we actually moved to Sweden, and we were planning to have her come and visit us in Sweden. But you may know how that turned out with COVID kicking off and international travel being cancelled. Finally, Japan is opening the border to all travellers very soon. As I record this, it's the end of September. In a couple more weeks, the border will be open for anyone. And I was planning to bring my mum under the family visa category, but we no longer need to go through that rigmarole to get her into the country. So really excited to have her coming at the start of November for the first time in 3 years. Goodness me. But today I would like to tell you a little bit about a guest we have coming on the show. Her name is Dr. Nyri A. Bakkalian, and she's actually right now in the United States, but I struggled to meet someone who loves Japan or a particular part of Japan more than Nyri does. And today she's coming on the show to talk a little bit about Shinto. And I met Nyri on LinkedIn through one of our previous guests on the show, Michelle Fuji, and we connected over the topic of Shinto. So Nyri is going to tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a practitioner of Shinto and how that works, even though she's in the United States at the moment, and she'd really love to get back to Japan. So I hope you enjoy the show. So Nyri, welcome to the Transformations with Jayne podcast. It's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and just telling our listeners why you're here today, what's your connection with Japan? That would be great.
So I am Nyri A. Bakkalian. My doctorate is from the University of Pittsburgh. I graduated in 2011. My doctoral thesis was on the history of the Boshin War in the Tohoku region. I lived in Sendai in 2005. I am an adherent of the Hachiman faith, which is part of Shinto. I am a podcaster on Japanese history and also a podcaster on my lived experience as a practitioner of Shinto in the Anglosphere here in the United States.
Yeah, wow. That's a lot of very in-depth Japanese things that you know about. So I'm really excited to have you on the show. I'm going to call them things. Have you on the show today. Yeah. The reason that my interest was really piqued when I first came across you on LinkedIn, it was through one of our guests,
Yes.
Michelle Fuji,
Hmm.
introduced me to you. Was
Hmm.
the Shinto connection, because
Yes.
personally I am a religious studies major in my
Hmm.
university days, and so I studied the world religions. I did not focus very much on the Asian religions, more the Western religions as they're called. Um,
Hmm.
and so when I found you, this Western person practitioner of Shinto, I was like, wow, I really have to ask this
Hmm.
person more. Obviously, I have some friends who have a Shinto shrine
Hmm.
themselves, friends of mine here in Iwaki, who I go to with my Shinto questions like, why are you doing that? Or, you know, what is that? What is that? But they struggle to have in-depth conversations with me about Shinto, or even how do you do it, because
Hmm.
how do you do Shinto? So I'm hoping we can learn some things, find out some new things. You can teach us a little
Sure.
bit about it. That would be really great. So how did
Sure.
you come to be a practicing Shinto follower? So you are Hachiman Ujiko. What does that mean?
So an ujiko is a parishioner of a shrine,
Hmm.
and my home shrine is in Sendai. It's the shrine Kameoka Hachimangu, the clan shrine of the Date family, which founded Sendai in 1600. As I said, I lived in Sendai in 2005, and I myself am Armenian. I am
Mm,
American born, but I was raised in Lebanon. And I come from a very, very, very long line of Armenian Protestant clergy.
okay. Wow.
And it's not exactly where you would imagine
No.
Hachimanji Ujiko to come from, right? um, it's it's a very it was a very weighty legacy to grow up with, because in the Armenian diaspora, you know, there are places where I would be recognized not for me, but for who my grandfather was,
Oh, wow.
or who my
Okay.
great grandfather was.
Mm.
Um, it really got it. Like as a kid, it was really annoying. You
I'm
know,
sure.
I nowadays I try to see it in terms of like honoring the ancestors, like
Mm.
the Mitama no Kami, of my
Yeah.
ancestors. Like, okay, that's very I'm touched that you see that in me. But
Yeah.
growing up, it was a pain in the butt, right?
Sure.
It it's just like, why can't you see me for me, for goodness
Yeah,
sake?
I'm a
You know,
person
add to
too.
that the
Yeah.
fact that I'm queer, and just it was like, why won't you just accept me for me on my own terms?
Mm.
So, but growing up in a long line of clergy, growing up a pastor's daughter, there was a lot expected of me, and the
Mm.
community always thought that, and folks out there in listener land who are pastors' kids themselves might know very well that when you're a pastor's kid, you're kind of expected to have the inside line to God.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
you must know it all, right? Like,
right,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
You're held to a higher standard of
Yes,
holiness, and
yes.
and so on. And
Yeah,
it was just empty motions. It
sure.
was like, this doesn't mean anything to me.
Hmm.
This is very nice. I still listen to I wasn't Orthodox, I was Armenian Protestant. And this is just like the drive-by postage stamp version is that Armenian Protestantism originated in Istanbul in the 1840s,
Right.
not in the Reformation in Europe in the 16th century. Um, but I grew up. Growing up, I was in the Orthodox schools
Hmm.
at some times in my life, and so I got to experience some of the Armenian Orthodox liturgy, and I still listen to that from time to time. It's still comforting because it's cultural heritage.
Sure.
But just in terms of like religious practice, it just didn't mean anything to me. It's like, why? What is this? Like, it's very. I mean, it was very laden with very patriarchal, very cis heterosexual
Mm.
demands,
Sure.
guilt and shame, and it was such a burden. And then I went to Japan in 2005 for my study abroad semester,
Was
and I
that,
don't know
can
what
I
I was
stop you there? Can I
expecting, but
just say, why
sure, sure.
Japan? Why Japan? For the, yeah.
Well, that's because when I was about 18 years old,
Yeah.
I watched an anime that was set in the Meiji period, And I started asking questions about, look, who are these? Like, this is supposedly a historical enemy. Who are these people?
Right.
And that's how I got interested in Tohoku history, because one of the characters was kind of the famous adopted son of Aizu in the 1870s, one of the Shinsengumi captains, Saito Hajime.
Okay.
So I kind of dug from there and sort of went into it from that angle. I went to Ursinus College for my bachelor's degree, and Ursinus College's sister school is Tohoku Gakuin Daigaku in Sendai.
Nice.
So through the exchange program, I went to Tohoku Gakuin. The program was, I was not happy because it was I didn't understand yet that I had ADHD. All I knew is that I was ridiculously bored. Okay. And then I realized that the only thing I had to do was pass the final exam at the end of the semester. And they didn't take attendance. So I just cut class.
Right. I hear it's quite common.
I was bored out of my mind. I didn't want to be there to study economics. Like I was an East Asian Studies major at Ursinus. Right. Why are you making me suffer through this? So I just cut class. So one day, I remember I was very angry about something that one of my teachers had said, and he just he wouldn't, he was frustrating me, and this life was frustrating me, and I was still angry at like being forced to be part of my parents' religion and all the very empty, rote, motions that it demanded of me. So I took a walk. I lived on the north side of town. I took the subway into Albaku, and then I walked through the sweltering humidity to Osaki Hachiman Shrine. Okay. On the day of its Matsuri, of the Reisai. And the moment I passed through the upper Tori was the moment that my life changed forever.
Oh my God.
Because it's starting from that point that I recognize myself in hindsight as being something like the same person I am today. Yeah. Something clicked. For my entire life until that point, I was lectured about, the divine, about God, about, this thing that is supposed to be part of my life, but just isn't there. What is it? Where is it? Why isn't it there? And then, this is very subjective. Like, this is very, this is my experience, just my specific experience. And, I'm not like, I try to be very careful about that. Like, I'm not trying to preach here, having come from a Christian background, especially, I want to make it be like, I always try to be abundantly clear. I'm not preaching here. But I remember coming through the Tori and just something in that moment felt like being embraced. Wow. And there was it was like there was like in the spaces between my breaths and in the wind and the trees and the commotion of the crowd, and just in that moment I just started sobbing. And I sat down on the wall under the big Tori on the top of the hill, as the festival's going on around me, and I had my face in my hands, and I just kept saying, I found you. Oh my God. And my life has never been the same since then.
No. Wow, I had full body goosebumps when you were telling me that story just now. Oh my goodness. What an amazing story about finding, and so unexpected, right? You weren't looking for it. You just sort of wandered into this situation, and then this place, obviously it's a magical spot. Shrines tend to be magical spots.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was waiting for you. Goodness me. And what happened next? Tell us the rest of the story.
It's funny. It's funny, like years down the road, I've been involved in online Anglophone Shinto spaces, and some of the the folks who come in there will go, well, which kami should I venerate? And it's just, I think back to that day on the hill in Sendai, and I think it doesn't work that way.
It's not about specific kami, or right. Yeah.
You're not trying to collect them. And I've had like a number of friends, including my co-host Zoe, on the Cleyera podcast who have reported that it's kind of a similar experience of, it's not that I chose them, they kind of tapped me on the shoulder, the kami kind of tapped me on the shoulder, like, I'd like your attention, please. So it sort of went from there.
Yeah, I have this sort of similar kind of experience with a particular shrine as well. I mentioned to you my friends who have a shrine, like they're the 89th generation to have this particular shrine. And when I go there, it's not, I'm not Shinto, but I feel like, there's something there. It's this, and when I take people there, they say, wow, this is really special. I'm like, right. Like they feel it too. In that particular space. It's the second oldest shrine in Japan, or one of the second oldest shrines in Japan. Yumoto Onsen Jinja. Onsen Jinja. Yeah.
Yumoto Onsen Jinja? I've heard of it.
Yeah. You should have. But it's very small and unassuming. And when you go there, it's not a massive big, is it called a honden? The
honden,
yeah, the big building or anything. Everything is very small and unassuming. But there's a something there, and I feel it when I go there. And when I was sent away to Sweden with my husband's job, and after we moved back to Iwaki, it was when I went back to that shrine that I was like, oh, I'm back. I'm home. I'm back in Japan. I feel like I'm here. I'm home now. I just, until then, I'd been kind of stuck between the two countries. So it's really interesting to notice that about these special places that shrines tend to be located, and I don't know what it is there, but anyway, go on, tell us more. What happened next?
So I was there until that day of the Matsuri let out, and I walked all the way home, didn't walk all the way home. I walked all the way back to the subway and sort of rode back in silence, and just my life has never been the same. It just the thing that I had looked for 2 decades at that point was there, but it was this deity of this other country in this other city. And I was like, okay, what do I do with this? If this is I'm like, and it took a while for me to actually to begin to develop something resembling a better understanding of it, to the point that I could have something I could honestly call a practice, like a daily practice. But I should underline here, it was Osaki Hachiman that I went to, the Kokuho, the national treasure site. But the shrine that I think of as my home shrine is Kameoka Hachiman, which is a different shrine to Hachiman-sama across the Hirose River, closer to Mount Alba. And it's specifically Kameoka Hachiman-gu that's the clan shrine of the Date family, which I had begun to study in my scholarly career at that point. And I felt like, if I was going to be investing so much of myself into studying the House Date of Sendai, that I should get to know their particular enshrining of this kami-sama. And so that's why
I'm getting body tingles again. I'm like, what is happening? I'm getting body tingles about you every time you talk about this connection between the Date family and
and so Kameoka Hachiman-gu is very unlike Osaki Hachiman in that it is, as you said about the Yumoto Onsen Jinja, unassuming. It's very small. It looks bigger than it is because it's on top of a hill, but it's very small. And if you didn't know its history already, you would miss it. The tourism, the foot traffic goes to Osaki Hachiman up the road, because that's the Kokuho, and it's got the supposedly Hidari Jingoro sculptures on the outside of the honden and so on, and it's gold. It's got gold and
so it looks pretty fantastic.
It looks pretty. It's grandiose. But Kameoka Hachiman, by contrast, is small. There's these 300 plus stone steps that go all the way to the top of the hill.
Oh wow!
And there's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of them that are in questionable state.
Oh wow!
And it's sort of this very very paradoxically very quiet, very unassuming place. But it's sort of became, and again, this gets more into the subjective stuff, but it became part of, what helped me find the strength to, come out as queer and to stand up and like make my own life and my own identity, just regardless of what my parents or what my ethnic community would say. I would always, I would pray to Hachiman-sama. And, when we say Hachiman Okami, this is a term that's a triune. This is an entity that's triune. It's three beings who share one title. And two of the three at Kameoka Hachiman are women. Wow. So, I took to thinking of Hachiman-sama as kind of a mother figure, and so I would, I would pray, especially in grad school. A lot of the time was, my prayer, like riding the bus into another dissertation meeting, would be like, Mother, please open the way. And yeah, and if you think about it, if you read like the Heike Monogatari or so on, what is the instance in which you see Hachiman Okami mentioned? It's when a warrior wants to take the long shot, the impossible shot. Nasu no Yoichi and people like that who want to land the impossible shot and go home safe. Yeah. And so it always, became part of my sense of my relationship to this deity. It's like, okay, I feel like life is overwhelming and I can't make it through, but help me land the impossible shot, open the way, help me come home. And so I drew great strength from that. Yeah. Wow. It's not so much, it's very unlike the idea of, that I grew up with in church of, God being a comforter. It's more, the divine helping you up and saying, okay, go back. Don't shy away from the battle. Go back, pick up the bow and shoot back. For someone who grew up as disempowered as I did, in the Armenian diaspora, where, you have to subordinate your own interests, your own desires, your own needs to the needs of the community and the survival of the community. It was a, no pun intended, it was a godsend, Interesting. So that shaped a lot of where my life went since then. Right. I went to grad school. I did my MA and PhD. My PhD just got released from embargo last Friday, so people who want to read it can read it.
What does that mean?
That means that it was
people who are not academics and don't know.
So what that means is that one of the conditions under which I deposited my doctoral thesis was that it would be restricted to the University of Pittsburgh's archive for a period of 5 years. Okay. That just elapsed last Friday.
Right. Oh wow. Is that a congratulations or not? Like
that is a congratulations. Yeah. My writing style is very different now. But if people want to read it, they can read it. It's a very in-depth history of the Tohoku region, and it's nominally about the Boshin War, but it's actually about the long roots of local semi-autonomy in Tohoku. Sort of as a region that, in the words of, I think it was Amino Yoshihiko, as a historian of the I think the 1970s and 80s, called it inside but outside Japan.
Interesting.
So yeah, but that moment under the Torii in 2005 really just, I could not have imagined in that moment just how much would change because of that. And now here I am with like I say, here I am, 17 years later with an MA, a PhD, a bum knee, and a caffeine addiction. And also a podcast about Shinto.
So how does one start out with Shinto if one was thinking, yeah, I really like it, something speaks to me about it, like this? You must have been just like, okay, where do I start now?
Right, exactly.
Right? Like, what's the next step? Curious to hear.
The hard part for me, and a lot of folks I've spoken to since then who I've tried to mentor, is, if you're growing up in a household that's like oppressively Christian, and like I had parents who would have been very upset to find out that I had converted. Sure. How do you do it, right? a lot of the folks in the online spaces that I have moderated over the years have been young and queer, and on both counts already have to hide a lot of who and what they are.
Okay, right.
So, how do you do that? Well, you sort of try to like, for me, like, looking back on it now, what I would have told my younger self is try to understand that Shinto is deeply entwined with the mundane. This is not that God is out there, up there. God is here. Like, the kami is here. It's all around. It's like, okay, yeah, gods, multiple gods. There are neighbors. So, let's try to be good neighbors to them. Understand that, like, I would have counseled my younger self, understand that you live in as part of a web with in terms of your relations to other humans, to nature, and to the divine. Try to cultivate harmony. Try to cultivate and beyond that, there's the more mechanical aspects of how do I set up a kamidana, like a household shrine. What do I pray? I have a
what does my schedule look like?
exactly. And sometimes, and really it can take different forms. And I worry sometimes in the West, especially, that people hear Shinto doesn't have any dogma, and they assume Shinto doesn't have any rules, which is very much not the case.
Sure, yeah.
There's a way of doing things. There are things that are expected, particularly when you get into ritual. This is sort of getting more on that side. But in terms of just like day to day, like, understand that it's not this thing that happens in this special space once a week. Particularly for so many of us who come from Christianity, it's sort of just there in the background of your life. And really, most Japanese people, I would imagine, like, from what I saw when I was there, wouldn't really, bat an eyelash, right? It's like, oh yeah, the neighborhood shrine. So, it's
need
right
something,
there.
drop in.
Need something, drop in. You don't have to particularly be involved with this shrine. You can drop in. It's okay.
For everyone.
Like, there was. You have these like little roadside shrines. Like, I used to go for long walks around my neighborhood in Sendai, or astride National Route 4. And I remember that my definition of walking distance and the study abroad office's definition of walking distance were very different. Because they said there are no shrines in walking distance of the student housing.
Right.
And I found like 10 the next day.
Right.
But it was like these tiny little things.
Sometimes it's like, who's looking after this?
Who's looking? There's some of them that nobody's looking after, sadly.
Right. Yeah.
So
we found one, like where I live here. We went on this random bush bashing walk, and we're like, oh, there's something over there, and we sort of went off the path and went sort of over this hill, and we're like, there's a blimmin' little shrine here. It's got a great view. It sort of was looking out over the valley. You can see why they put it there, but I'm like, who the hell looks after this? It's like, it must be a person who owns the mountain potentially, who makes sure it's okay occasionally. But it was really surprising. Some of the places you find them, and the neglected, forgotten ones as well, with the vines climbing all over them, and nobody's taken any care of it for years, and it's sort of really sad as well. Oh my goodness.
It really is a shame. It really is a shame. Right. I remember this one little shrine, I think it was an Ikazuchi shrine, behind this cluster of billboards astride National Route 4, and the doors of the little hokora had been smashed in, and I could see the mirror inside, and I just it felt a little bit like walking past someone's house that had just been burgled. It was like, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. People are idiots.
Right. So if someone is new to Japan, and I think, when I first arrived in Japan, I was like, oh, is it okay to visit this shrine? Or, like I felt like I was trespassing the first few times I went there, and it took a while to get used to it. And I didn't know what to do. This was before Google, obviously, where you could Google like how to go to a shrine or look at a YouTube video, right? But it definitely felt like I was trespassing. And
Mhm.
that's not the case at all, right? The shrines
Yeah,
are
yeah,
for anyone. Um,
yeah.
what would be your top tips for visiting a shrine to pay respects or to ask for something, or maybe you have a
Well,
reason that you want to visit, need some, you got a big exam coming up, or
right,
you're looking
right.
for love, or whatever it is that we ask kami-sama for. Or maybe you're just passing by and you always thought, oh, I'd love to go in there. What would be your
Mm.
top
Well,
tip?
there's the basic sort of the saho, the washing the hands, washing the mouth in the purification basin,
Yes.
before you go up in front of the haiden. But you know, try to, and I understand that, like, times change and we have to change with them, but like, try to have, try to show a little bit of, try to show just a little bit of decorum.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Mm.
like I feel like this should go without saying, but people are terrible. Um, try to show a little bit of decorum. Like, you don't have to believe in any of it, but just understand this is a sacred place, and just, show some modicum of respect.
Mm.
If you're going to make a request of the gods, I would say, follow the standard protocol of wash your hands, wash your mouth, and then go up. um
Which
there's the clap
interestingly
twice, bow.
we can't do anymore, right? They've taken all
Exactly,
of that
exactly.
away. Ah, what
Exactly,
do we do?
exactly, exactly. Not to mention, I mean, goodness sakes, not to mention some of the photos I've seen of some of the chozuya over the years.
Mhm.
Even before the pandemic, just some of them just look so gross. Like, you know,
Yeah,
like
right.
some of
You
them
don't
just like
really
seemed
want to
like,
do that.
places that aren't like actively, like aggressively tended, right?
Mhm.
Where it's like overgrown with, it's like mossy or what have you, and like,
Mm.
but like, try to, I guess, like, really what it would boil down to, regardless of the specifics, would be, this is the thing that Zoe and I often will counsel people. We will say,
Mm.
understand that what matters the most is sincerity.
Yeah.
Do what you can with what you have, and be sincere in how you approach the kami-sama, and the kami-sama will understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, being sincere. Sure,
Yeah,
the situation requires that we do not share tools and spit water and all of that at the
exactly,
moment.
exactly,
So
exactly.
that's understood, and yeah, that's a great explanation
Although
for it. Mm.
some shrines are adapting. I've actually heard of a couple that are doing like sort of an automated, like a dispenser kind of deal,
Oh, nice.
where they like
Right.
dispensing into cups.
Okay.
It's
No,
this is an
interesting.
I can't remember which ones, but I have a colleague, who is a priestess in Konkokyo down in Yokosuka,
Mm-hmm.
who periodically will send, news and items of curiosity my way. And one of them
Mm,
was about, some shrines. Again, I can't remember which ones have adapted the chozuya to the needs of the pandemic.
sure.
So it's
Yeah. It
ru-
does.
you know pay, like, I would say to people, like, pay attention to stuff like that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
understand the times change and we have to change with them.
Mm, mm,
But,
mm, mm.
sincerity and respect, really.
Goes a long way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a sort of irrational connection with Heian Jingu in Kyoto.
Mm, mm,
So it's the first place I ever went to do Hatsumode, the
mm,
first Hatsumode ever in Japan. And
mhm,
I was sort of, and it was a weird experience in that I was in Kyoto for New Year's Eve and we were walking around and looking at all the different temples and shrines and things. And for some reason, we were being drawn down the road towards
mm,
Heian Jingu.
mhm,
And we ended up being outside Heian Jingu after at midnight. And so we waited there and we did our first Hatsumode prayers for the new year there. And things I wished for, and sort of was like, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, okay, I I've got this guy I really like, and I want him to, I want to be together with him. Tick that off. My father was really ill, and I was like, I want him to, stay well for longer. I knew he's had terminal cancer, but all these things I wish for kind of worked out. And I was like,
mhm.
wow, there's some powerful mojo here at this shrine. So a year later, we went back and we did. We said thank you for
Yeah.
for what happened. Like I went back a year later and I said thank you for, you know, this relationship I now have with this man, and my father is still, you know, keeping going. So and all of that, and then in 2011. You remember what happened in 2011?
Yes, all too well.
Yeah, right. And so I'm in Fukushima, right? And I'm pregnant with my first child. And we had to leave, obviously. We couldn't stay here in Iwaki City.
Right.
So my husband's from Kyoto. So, not Kyoto, Tottori, past Kyoto. And so we decided we needed to leave. And so we drove. And we drove to Heian-jingu. And so we were like, well, we're going to Kyoto, let's go to Heian-jingu. So we went to Heian-jingu and we were like, thank you for whatever delivering us from whatever happened. And could you please stop the nuclear meltdown as well? Thank you. And a safe birth for me. And somehow it all worked out. And so then we took my daughter back there when she was born. Thank you. Here's my daughter who was born safely.
Yeah.
So it's this this really random but very long-lasting relationship with this particular shrine, which is Heian-jingu.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's just really weird.
These things happen.
Yeah. So I like to tell that story. There's a lot of sort of, like, I don't call it magic, but something there, right?
Something.
Yeah, something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Goodness me. Yeah. So you're not in Japan right now.
Yeah,
Do you have
unfortunately,
any plans to get back here?
I am so desperate to get back to Sendai.
I know, you're one of the people who want to be first in line to get on the plane, right?
Like really, it's a matter of money. You know, it's a matter of not just money, but primarily it's a matter of money and time and health. You know, there's things that I need to. There are things that I need to account for that I didn't the last time I was there. You know, I'm pushing 40 now, and I have to be cognizant of, you know, some of my needs that I didn't have before. You know, I wear a knee brace now. I deal with chronic pain. You know, I have, you know, there are medications that I have to marshal, and there's accommodations that I have to marshal, and you know, it's very complicated. But like bottom line is, like, as soon as I can line all of that up, I am going to come back to Sendai. And I in my head, I can see it very clearly. Like, the first thing I'm going to do is that after I have deposited my belongings in my accommodations, I am going to go to Sendai Station, and I'm going to go out onto Albadori. I am going to walk the 2.5 miles to Kameoka Hachimangu, go up the 360 stone steps.
Right.
And probably fall to my knees at that point.
Right.
But it will be in a good cause.
Right.
Because I will have finally closed the circle.
Yes,
I will have finally come back. Like, this is like it's interesting, like, given these spiritual connections and professional connections, there are a lot of folks out there who think that I am from Sendai.
Right.
I am not. I call it my hometown. I'm not from there, but it's the first place I felt like that I actually could embrace on my own terms, and not because my parents dragged me there, or because of, you know, what have you. This is sort of a phenomenon of the third culture kids in general. I know, you know, that you really don't. It may take you a while to feel like there's a place that's yours. So for me, that was Sendai. But
wow.
You know, and when the tsunami happened in 2011, it was really wild. Like, first time I saw my Japanese teacher after that for seminar, you know, I can't remember what, because one of the things that Pitt did right was that it had this option for one-on-one Japanese instruction for grad students, where you parse through a text that you're particularly needing for your research. So my teacher actually is from Tottori, from Sakai Minato.
Okay, right.
And so we sat down, and he asked me if I was okay, and I said, I don't know. And he said, you know, the local TV station, you know, interviewed me about the tsunami and asked me if I knew anyone from Sendai, and you were the first to come to mind. And I was like,
Uh,
I'm touched. I'm touched. The irony is he actually had a colleague who was actually born in Sendai.
Sure.
But it just it kind of blew my mind that he would think of me first.
Isn't it interesting? Yeah. That you,
Yeah. Like it left an imprint. It
Yeah.
left an imprint.
Mm.
It just, but it's very important to me to like make that return and to
Oh,
finally
yes,
be back again. And
I can feel how that must feel to be away from there for you. Yeah.
it hurts.
Yeah.
It hurts.
It
It
hurts.
hurts. Like
Mm.
it's going on 20 years now. It's like 17 going on 20 years pretty soon. It
Mm.
hurts, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get back, honestly. Like
Mm.
I am an independent author, but that is subject to the whims of the market and my ability to get new gigs. And
Yep. Yeah.
but I'd like to think I could make it happen. And yeah, I plan to go and make my report to the Ujigami-sama, the first thing, and then to cross back down the road, up the switchback path up Mount Alba, and then to go and greet Date Masamune at his equestrian statue, which is not there right now because they're repairing it.
Yeah, because it nearly like toppled off, didn't it? In one of the many aftershocks we've had.
my co-host, my Cleyera co-host Zoe, when I told her about that, I was just in panic mode because this is the symbol of the city. This is like something I have taken great strength from. Sendai has been so ravaged by natural disaster, like, and studying the Boshin history and earlier, it blew my mind just how often it had been hammered by natural disaster, and famine, and war, and then another war, and it just kept coming back. But then this statue that's the symbol of the city and its strength and its history was damaged, and I was in panic mode, and I told Zoe about this. And for those who don't know, Date Masamune, the city's founder, was how do I like to put it, a consummate lover of people of all genders.
Oh,
interesting. He was what we queer folk call a disaster buy.
A disaster buy.
And so Zoe's reaction, just without missing a beat, was, "Wow, the old man's looking a lot less straight than usual, huh?"
Oh, right. Interesting.
So that cheered me up just a bit.
Oh, my goodness.
But yeah, I imagine that by the time I get back, it'll be back, and
I'm sure.
I can go and pay my respects there too.
Well, this seems like a good time to segue into you telling us about your next book, which is coming out very soon.
Yes.
What's your book called?
Confluence, a person-shaped story, which is a translation of its Japanese title, Goryu Ningyoki.
Okay, and what's this book about?
It is a cyberpunk novel that is set in, well, it's not just in Ishinomaki, but the protagonist lives in Ishinomaki, and there's different parts of it that happen on Sabusawa Island and the Urato chain in Matsushima Bay. There's parts of it that happen in Sendai. There's parts of it that happen elsewhere that I won't talk about because that would spoil the story. But it's about a cyborg who is this formerly American-born a queer woman who, and I'm kind of like, I'm getting into a little bit of autobiographical stuff here, but just this American-born queer woman who becomes a cyborg out of a desire to protect and be of use to her Japanese spouse. And then along the way, they find that there are other cyborgs whose chassis, whose parts have been made by a now defunct company, who are in need and who have been abandoned by the whims of capitalism and of government exigency, and that there's more under the surface than meets the eye.
Interesting.
What this began as was me sort of screaming into the wind earlier this year and just telling myself a story in the interest of writing something that was set in Sendai and in and around Sendai, and just sort of also talking my way through, okay, I am a trauma survivor, I am a daughter of a diaspora. And putting myself back together is something that's very important to me. It's something that like I'm tired of, like I was saying at the time, like I'm tired of dragging my brokenness around. What if I put it all back together in a new shape?
Mm.
And so I took the cyborg conversion as sort of an allegory for that,
Right.
like, you know, putting the brokenness together into a new shape. And it really was interesting to me that the term ningyo, doll in Japanese, is written shito no katachi, shape of person.
Yes, yes.
So it's like, you know, this idea of like, and I kind of like thought of it as, okay, you know, if I'm, as I was telling myself this story, you know, I thought of it like, okay, well, you know, if I feel like I'm broken and I'm putting myself back into a new shape, maybe just being person shaped is enough, you know?
Right.
You know, just permission to be imperfect, permission to not fit the hard lines, you know? And so it ran away with itself, and it grew a plot, and it grew a cast, and you know, and before I knew it, there were these national stakes and you know, and the sort of fate of the world kind of stuff that was happening. And it just like, you know, like I say in the introduction, before I knew it, I had 50,000 words written and I didn't know what to do with them.
Right.
But it's going to be a book. I'm also very proud of the fact that this is, and I'm following the example of Japanese authors that I really admire. Primarily, you know, top of the list is Asada Jiro, who takes great pains in writing characters who speak in different dialects.
Nice. All right.
So my novel is in English, and it's got sort of bracketed subtitles in line with the dialogue. But you know, my protagonist is Armenian American and speaks standard Japanese. Her spouse is born in Ishinomaki and does speak English and Hyojungo, but speaks Sendai Ben out of spite. Right. Much later in the story, we meet the protagonist's great aunt, like, or the memory of her, who speaks in a mostly now sadly lost dialect of Western Armenian.
Right.
And it's important to me as a child of diaspora who code switches all the time to write this into the kind of fiction that I write, because that's my lived experience.
Wow.
You know, not everybody's going to speak English all the time. Not everybody's going to speak standard Japanese all of the time.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah. Fascinating that you have created this from just this feeling that you had that you needed to put yourself back together, and now you have a book, and a story, and characters,
and Shinto fits into this as well. There's some very important scenes that happen at my home shrine.
Great.
There's a Hatsumode. There's a prayer for safe childbirth. There's omamori that appear at a couple points in the story as important. Physical objects in the narration. This is sort of woven in as part of the narrative, because it's, again, part of my lived experience. In some respect. It's also been useful to have the feedback of my Cleyera co-host Zoe, because her perspective is different than mine, because I am a Hachiman Ujiko, but she is an Inari Ujiko. And so
Inari Jinja?
Yeah, Inari Jinja, and her official affiliation is with Fushimi Inari Taisha, but when she is able to, she would like to instead have it be with Takekoma Inari in Miyagi Prefecture, which is one of the other big Inari in Japan. I think it's one of 3 big ones in Japan. But having her perspective as somebody who is part of a different shrine faith, sort of to balance things out for me, has been very constructive. And it really does very well also on the podcast. Like, I could talk about Hachiman faith till the cows come home, but but having Zoe to sort of, have an interplay with, of like, these are 2 different faiths under the umbrella of Shinto, and how do our practices differ? How are they similar? Really, I think is very helpful, and it's sort of, I think, gives the show a little bit more of a charm.
Definitely. So how many Ujiko would you say there are in this English speaking community that you're growing, obviously? Like,
Honestly, I couldn't tell you how many of them are actually Ujiko and how many of them are just listeners.
Okay, but how many do you know who are Ujiko? Yeah, that definitely Ujiko.
Of Hachiman faith, I have only met 2.
Wow.
We are even in the United States, we are in the extreme minority.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States, there is Tsubaki Shrine in Washington State, and there is now Shusei Inari Jinja in Los Angeles. Okay. That's it.
Interesting. And I'm surprised there are any. So
really.
Right.
It's, in the continental United States, that's it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So, it's great for the Inari faith folks, and it's great for the Tsubaki faith folks, but that doesn't really help me very much.
Right.
And so I've only known 2 other people in the United States who are Hachiman Ujiko. Both of them, like me, are queer. So we bonded over that too. But so I've sort of had to fall in with the other folks of other faiths within that umbrella of Shinto. So a lot of folks I know are Inari Ujiko or are Temmangu Ujiko. I couldn't give you numbers there because not my particular set.
Yeah,
not my particular. But
I was just wondering, is it
way more?
Hundreds or thousands, or
I would estimate. If I had to just spitball a number,
say a number.
I would guess that we're in the thousands in North America.
Surprising.
And for all of us, there's probably how many would there be? There's Barish Sensei in Washington. There's Hasegawa Sensei in Los Angeles, and there's Kanawa Sensei closer to me in Maryland, and that's it. 3 people, 3 licensed kannushi.
Right.
The entire North American continent.
Are they in other countries as well? Like, I wouldn't expect there to be anybody outside Japan practicing Shinto.
You'd be surprised. There's a jinja in San Marino. There's a jinja in the Netherlands.
No way.
There's apparently a very recently established one in Taiwan, even.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. Outside the continental U.S., in Hawaii, there are actually many jinja. There's a whole bunch of them, along with Japanese Buddhist temples. But that's a little bit less surprising given the history there.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, there's actually quite a few. The problem, I think, in North America, and I'm not too intimately familiar with the history, but my understanding is that there had been more of a footprint that may have grown into more of an established presence, but then the Second World War happened, and one of the groups of people in the United States that were subject to, along with the general Japanese American population, were subject to incarceration were specifically Shinto priests.
Sure. Yeah.
Given the role of state Shinto at the time, it's like I can see how the U.S. government would have rationalized that. That doesn't make it right, but it just, it is like I can see why they would rationalize that to themselves. But their having done that very significantly curtailed what would have otherwise been a more established presence coming out of the 1940s. Right. And so basically from nothing, there was a new wave that had to pick up, and so now there's 2 in the continental U.S.
I see. Right. Yeah, that makes sense now that you say that. Yeah, and I guess I'm thinking from my New Zealand background, where we don't really see a lot of international religions in my own country. It's not really a thing. But I guess in the United States, there are a lot of, as you grew up in the Armenian diaspora church, Protestant church, as you said, and there's a lot of imported religions happening in America. Yeah. Okay. So Japan is there as well, but not in the presence that it might have had the World War not come along.
Yeah.
Well, that is interesting. Well, Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I've had
Thank you for having me.
such a huge learning curve about a lot of things. Thank you for letting me ask you all about things about Tohoku as well. And I really
Hmm.
feel your connection with Tohoku so strongly. Even myself, I can feel it over here sitting in Fukushima. So I'm
Hmm.
crossing fingers and doing all those things, thinking, how can we get you back to Japan?
I would
Yeah.
like that
And
very
how can you,
much.
yeah, get to a point where you're able to come back and really enjoy your trip back to your other home? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
All righty. Well, we'll keep in touch and we'll look forward to your book coming out soon.
absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
I hope you enjoyed the episode with Nyri. I'm just so touched by how much she loves Sendai and all of the history of Japan, which she explained a lot to me actually before I press record. And, and we had a great chat about the history of Tohoku, and I was able to ask her a few things about my area where we actually don't have a lot of recordings of history here. So that was really great to connect with her over that and to hear a little bit more about Shinto, what it's like to practice Shinto. And I did not know that there were actually shrines outside of Japan. That was surprising. Also, Nairi's new book, which is coming out, sounds like it's going to be very interesting, especially if you know the area of Sendai and Ishinomaki where it's set. And I can't say I've ever read something in that genre before, but I'm really looking forward to reading it when it comes out. And you can find the link to that website where you can find out about the book when it comes out in November in the show notes. Also, yeah, if you enjoy the show today, why not say hi to Nyri on one of the platforms of social media and say you heard her on the show. I'm sure she'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening today. We'll see you again soon. Bye bye.